Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank you again for coming to the opening, and also to especially, well, as well to the collectors who have loaned some of the work that's here. I really appreciate it because I don't think the show would be the same without it. It was important for me to have the work that's the work that's here in this group. Well, the title of the exhibition is called The Impossibility of Measuring Our Connectivity, which in a way has to do with infinity or ideas about infinity, and specifically having to do with infinity as reflected in nature. Talley said, I've been in Ireland, and it's based on looking at the landscape. I'm also from El Paso, which is it's also looking at the West Texas desert. But these last few years I've been in Ireland, and it's I think looking the sense of infinity as reflected, say, when you look at the ocean or when you look at a mountain range or a field, and trying to get a grasp of it. Of course, the night sky, trying to get a grasp of it. And I'm fascinated by attempts at how scientists try and measure that. We always hear, it seems like every few months we a new galaxy is discovered, I don't know, so many billion light years away. But that there's more. It's how we measure that, and then know that it's limited. There's still much more beyond that, and the numbers are phenomenal. And that's always been kind of interesting to me. Now, with these paintings, it's having that in mind, but it's also how they're not so much like landscape paintings, but it's about looking at the landscape and having an image of the landscape, and you approach the landscape, and as you approach it, it kind of breaks down. It breaks down into smaller forms or simpler forms, and you get closer to the simpler forms, and it breaks down even further. And I'm very interested in paintings that say, like say the one on the wall, on the far wall, where you have an image of it from here. You have this image of it, and as you approach it, it kind of dissolves and becomes something else, or you discover other things, and it's hard to kind of get a grasp of it. These works are the closest thing to working outside. I've never painted literally outside, like being a plein air painter. I have a little studio in Ireland that is right by a lake. There's only a small field with a few cows between me and the lake. So it's a very small studio, but it's amazing. It's got 2 doors, and I feel like I'm working outside. I work in, and then I look out, and there's a lake, there's the Wicklow Hills, and so I'm constantly going back and forth, in and out, and in and out. And so it's, so like I said, these aren't specifically a particular landscape, but they're about how you decipher that, how how shapes take form, how your memory of it, and how they come together and dissolve, and how it's really kind of ungraspable. There's also, this is, what you're seeing is over 2 years worth of work. The series is, I don't know if you've noticed, but the paintings are numbered 7 through 14. 1 through 6 were shown over 2 years ago at the Armory in New York City. So it's been this ongoing series. It's so you have the 14 here, and I'm not sure I have much else to say, really. If you have any questions, or about the work. And yeah, sorry.
So noticeably, there's a shift in the palette and color.
Yeah.
You have such interest in color. And the last series, the paintings were very dark and grays and blacks and
Right.
very deep, dark color
Right.
palette. This is such a shift. How do you approach these as far as palette and color, the decisions you're making when you approach each work?
Yeah.
Or what's shifted?
Yeah. Yeah, the last paintings I didn't necessarily see as dark. I didn't necessarily see as dark. I saw them more kind of elemental, more mineral-y. So I actually saw a lot of color in them, but for, they're pretty gray, I guess, but I saw a lot of color in them. I think the more time I spent there, the other paintings were done, actually I painted them here in Dallas. They were done here. Maybe it's a change of place, because these are the first paintings that I've painted there. And I feel literally immersed in the landscape. So the colors are coming from the landscape, what I see, and my, my reaction to it, or, and where I live is, it's Wicklow County is known as the Garden of Ireland. And I always thought, like, well, wait a minute, Ireland is lush everywhere. Like, why is this the garden? But I think it's because it's the variation of landscape. There's areas that are very sparse. I mean, you'd think you were on, I don't know, not the moon, but like, they're very sparse. And it's just gorse growing there. If you know what gorse is, it's very bright yellow. It's just this very scraggly, and heather, which is this beautiful purple color. No trees growing. It's just very sparse. And then you have forests and, lakes and everything. So I think it's all the elements of a garden that are there in different places around the county. I take it all in. I'm running around everywhere, hiking, walking, and yeah. So I think I'm not aware of it a lot of times. It's just, yeah. Sorry.
Can you, it's beautiful work, and
Thank you.
congratulations on this wonderful show. Can you talk a little bit about your process? Do you start with a sketch? Are you using projectors, or it looks like it's freehand, but...
They're not that high tech, no. You know what, I don't start with a sketch, and I don't use projectors. I don't start off with a sketch, but I start sketching on them. And I just start off with, some people have said that they're very kind of map-like, and in a funny way, I am kind of, the canvas, I'm using that as like this space that I start kind of maneuvering around, literally moving around. And I think it's an accumulation of like what ifs. It's like, well, what if I went that way? And what if I went that way? What if it was like this? What if it was like that? What if it was... So it's this constant back and forth, and things get erased or changed, or,
Is there memory involved?
You know what? It's funny. I try not to have a memory of it. After, say, a day's work, I try not to remember what I've done, which is hard because, of course, you're going to remember what you've done. But for me, I'd like to see it just raw, and start working on that. But that's very hard to do, I find. It's just so that there's no preconception of it. That I like thinking that I'm looking at it like it's a strange thing every time I go to it. That I'm, yeah. Sorry, yes.
On the question about the process, it kind of looks like there are two paintings. There's kind of an abstract, colorful painting, and then there's almost like a satellite vision overlay the interconnectivity. How do you do those in terms of timing? Do you do that sort of abstract background first, or is it all done together? Or?
There started off with acrylic. I start off with acrylic paint, and then when that gets to a point that I find interesting, or then I switch to oil, and then I just stick with oil. There's no method, I go back to them. I'm constantly going back to them. In fact, sometimes I'm going like, okay, I think that's done. I think that's it for that painting. I put it away. 2 months later, I'm moving it. Patrick will know this. 2 months later, I'm moving it. I'm going like, that's not finished. That's not finished. I thought it was finished. It's not finished.
So the sketching is back and forth too, when you say you sketch on them?
It's kind of accumulated. Yeah. And it's very kind of incremental. It's very kind of small things that just keep adding up. And they add up kind of like, I don't know, like lichen or fungus. It starts off with little dots, and then before you know it, it's covered the tree trunk, or it's covered the stone. It's kind of like that. It's very slow, and yeah.
You work on a few things at a time?
I've tried and I can't. Yeah, no, it's one. Whether it's even a drawing like this, it's just that.
It seems like you're saying that you do the acrylic oil process of an abstract painting, and then you do an overlay of this grid afterwards?
Yeah, well, I start going back into it and
You do that at the same time, the grid at the same time?
Yeah. You know what it is? It's almost addressing a positive and a negative space. It's almost like drawing a tree, and then you start drawing the tree, but then you start drawing the sky that you're seeing through the branches. So it's kind of going back and forth like that. It's like that sense of space back and forth.
So with this series, which I assume is complete, maybe not complete in terms of number of artworks or not, but knowing the difference between this series and then your past works and other series, and the difference in kind of inspiration you get and color palette and just overall look, I was wondering if you could shine some light on what you are working on now or thinking about doing, if it's going to be kind of inspired by this or similar to this, or if you want to go in a totally different direction.
Yeah, it's, what's weird is like, very few people have seen these works before you all today. But some friends did come over, and they were saying like, especially that there's a drawing hung on its own wall in the back room, and someone saw it and said, "Oh, that's a map of the world." And I saw it and I said, "Yeah, it is very map-like." And it's not that I started with the idea of making maps, but I am fascinated with maps, and I think that it sparks some. I've been looking at like ancient maps, and I really like first of all, their inaccuracy, but they're based on ideas about what's out there, and there's almost like a fear of it. I've seen some maps where like Europe is like that, and then the U.S. is like this skinny little, the Americas, because it's not known. But I like that spark of the imagination of what's not known, and well, what's the shape of it? How would it be? And not that I'm going to start making maps, but I am fascinated by that idea. And I think it's how it sparks the imagination. And, they usually would draw the ocean, and then, well, of course, these are times when they thought the world was flat, really. So there's like all these like demons that they would draw, like if you go off the ocean, it's like that's, or, so anyway. So maybe, I don't know if I've answered the question, but it's. It's, yeah. I'd like, there's 14 paintings, and I think 14 is, maybe I think where I'm gonna cut it off, but I'd like to do a very large one that's maybe more than twice as big as, like a very large scale one. I have this idea about it, so, but you know, that's neither here nor there.
That sounds very cool.
Yeah,
That sounds very cool.
we support you on that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming.